They say the woods have eyes. That's what my grandpa used to tell me, his voice low and raspy, the scent of pipe tobacco and old secrets clinging to him. He'd say it with a look in his eyes, a look I never understood. Not until now. I'm recording this because I don't know if I'll make it out of here. The trees, they're not just trees. And the things that move between them, they're not animals. I saw one of them. It wore a face I recognized. God, I wish I hadn't. If you're listening to this, if you find this, don't come looking for me. Just burn the woods down. Burn it all down. My name is Ethan, or at least it was. The man I am now feels like a hollowed-out version of the one who drove up to the sleepy town of Havenwood just 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. It feels like a lifetime. I came here chasing a ghost, a half-forgotten memory of my estranged grandfather, a man I only knew through faded photographs and my mother's bitter recollections. He left me his cabin, a small, dilapidated structure nestled deep in the sprawling national forest that bordered the town. My mom called it the Devil's Acreage. I just thought it was a chance to escape the city, to breathe in air that didn't taste of exhaust fumes and regret. The drive up was scenic, a winding ribbon of asphalt cutting through miles of dense emerald green forest, the kind of place that made you feel small, insignificant, in the face of nature's raw, untamed beauty. I remember smiling, a genuine, unforced smile for the first time in months. The cabin was exactly as I'd pictured it, rustic, charmingly run down, and utterly isolated. It was perfect. The first few days were idyllic. I spent my time hiking the winding trails, fishing in the crystal-clear streams, and losing myself in the symphony of the wilderness. The silence was a balm to my frayed nerves, a welcome respite from the constant cacophony of city life. But then the nights came, and with them a subtle, creeping unease. It started with the sounds, strange, unidentifiable noises that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the woods. A low, guttural growl that wasn't a bear or a wolf. A high-pitched chittering sound that made the hair on my arms stand on end. I tried to rationalize it, to dismiss it as the nocturnal wanderings of woodland creatures. But the sounds were too deliberate, too patterned. They weren't random. One night, I heard a sound like branches snapping in a steady rhythm, like footsteps. But they were too heavy for a deer, too deliberate for a bear lumbering through the lumber growth. They circled the cabin once, twice, then faded back into the cacophony of crickets. I told myself it was the wind. It's always the wind. The next night, it changed. The sound wasn't animalistic anymore. It was a cry, a faint, high-pitched wail that sounded disturbingly like a baby. It rose and fell on the wind, a desperate, lonely sound that tugged at some primal part of my brain. I froze, my hand hovering over the phone, my heart hammering against my ribs. Should I call the sheriff? Report a lost child? But the sound was so strange. It seemed to come from everywhere at once. And just as I was about to dial, it stopped. Utter silence. The kind of silence that's louder than any noise. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in a chair by the window, a fireplace poker clutched in my white-knuckled fist, and watched the impenetrable darkness of the woods, waiting. The next morning I drove into Havenwood for supplies, mostly as an excuse to be around other people. The town was small, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business. I went to the one general store, a dusty old place called Silas's Sundries. The man behind the counter, presumably Silas, was ancient. His face was a road map of wrinkles, and his eyes, a pale, watery blue, seemed to see more than they let on.
"You're Arthur's boy," he said, not as a question, but as a statement. His voice was a dry rustle, like leaves skittering across pavement. "Grandson, actually," I corrected, trying for a friendly smile. "Ethan." He just grunted, his eyes lingering on me for a beat too long. "Stocking up for your stay at the cabin?" "Yeah, just need a few things. It's quiet out there." Silas's lips tightened into a thin line. The woods have their own kind of company. Not always the kind you want. He began ringing up my items: canned beans, coffee, a new heavier-duty flashlight. Arthur knew that. He respected the woods, knew their rules. "Rules?" I asked. My curiosity piqued. He paused, his hand hovering over the flashlight. "Don't whistle after dark. Don't answer if you hear your name called from the trees. And if you see something that looks almost human, it ain't." He slid the flashlight across the counter. "Your grandfather, he spent his last years trying to understand them. Some folks said it drove him mad." The drive back to the cabin felt different. The trees seemed to lean in closer, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching for my car. Silas's words echoed in my head. "If you see something that looks almost human, it ain't." It was just local superstition, of course, the ramblings of an old man trying to spook the city kid, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. That night, I decided to go through my grandfather's things. Most of it was junk: old fishing gear, stacks of yellowed newspapers, clothes that smelled of mothballs and damp earth. But in a locked footlocker under his bed, I found it. A collection of leather-bound journals. His handwriting was a spidery scrawl, almost illegible in places, but I was determined. I lit a lantern, poured a stiff whiskey, and began to read. October 12th, 1998. It's happening again. The mimicry is getting more sophisticated. Last night it was Eleanor's voice, clear as day, calling my name from the edge of the property, the exact way she used to call me in for supper. The grief, it's a physical thing, a hook in my chest. I know it's a trap. It uses our memories, our love against us. It feeds on the sorrow. But God help me. For a second, I almost went to her. My blood ran cold. Eleanor was my grandmother. She had died in a car crash decades ago. My grandfather had never been the same. I read on, my hands trembling. The journals were filled with chilling accounts of strange phenomena. Sounds, lights, and fleeting glimpses of tall, impossibly thin figures moving between the trees at dusk. He called them the listeners, or the echoes. He wrote that they were ancient, territorial beings, not of this world, who were drawn to places of strong emotion, particularly grief and loss. November 3rd, 1998. I saw one up close today, near the old creek bed. It was trying to look like a man, a hiker maybe, but it was all wrong. The limbs were too long, the joints bent at unnatural angles, and its face, it was smooth, like polished wood, with dark, hollow pits where the eyes and mouth should be. It didn't see me. It was just standing there, listening. I could feel it, like a pressure in my skull. It was sifting through the forest, through the air itself, tasting the memories left behind. I slammed the journal shut, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm. This was insane. My grandfather had lost his mind out here, alone with his grief. That had to be it. I was just letting his delusions get to me. I took another gulp of whiskey, the liquid burning a trail down my throat. But the fear was a cold knot in my stomach. The next few days were a blur of anxiety. Every creak of the cabin, every rustle of leaves sent a jolt of panic through me. I kept the lights on all night, jumping at shadows. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head. I was just a city boy, spooked by the unfamiliar sounds of the wilderness. But then came the incident with the photograph. I had brought a few things from my apartment to make the cabin feel more like home.
Among them was a framed photo of me and my ex-girlfriend, Sarah. We'd broken up about 6 months ago. It was messy, painful. The photo was from happier times, a trip to the coast. I'd set it on the mantelpiece above the fireplace. One afternoon, after a short, nerve-wracking hike where I felt like I was being followed the entire time, I came back to the cabin and noticed it immediately. The photo was no longer on the mantelpiece. It was on the small table next to my reading chair, facing the door, as if someone had picked it up, looked at it, and set it down. I lived alone. I locked the door whenever I left. There were no signs of forced entry. I searched the entire cabin, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. Nothing. No one. My first thought was that I'd moved it myself and forgotten. Stress can do that, right? Make you forgetful, paranoid. But I knew, with a chilling certainty that defied all logic, that I hadn't touched it. Something had been in the cabin. Something had looked at my picture. It had seen Sarah. It had seen my lingering heartbreak. That night, the sounds started again. But this time, they were different. It wasn't a baby crying or an animal growling. It was a voice. A woman's voice, whispering my name from just outside the window. Ethan. It was a soft, gentle whisper carried on the wind. My heart stopped. It sounded exactly like Sarah. Ethan, let me in. It's cold out here. I scrambled away from the window, my back hitting the opposite wall. My mind was screaming, it's not real, it's not her, it's the wind, it's the damn wind. But it was so clear. The specific cadence, the slight lilt in her voice that I knew better than my own. Please, Ethan, I miss you. Tears streamed down my face. A raw, agonizing sob escaped my lips. It was a cruel, twisted mockery of my pain. It was using my own grief as a weapon. Just like my grandfather had written, it feeds on the sorrow. I crammed my fists against my ears, trying to block out the sound, rocking back and forth on the floor. I stayed like that for hours until the first rays of dawn painted the sky in shades of gray and pink, and the terrible, beautiful voice finally faded away. I knew then that I couldn't stay. My grandfather might have been crazy, but he wasn't wrong. There was something in these woods, something ancient and malevolent, and it had taken an interest in me. I spent the morning frantically packing my bags, throwing my clothes and belongings into my car. I didn't even bother to clean up. I just wanted to leave. I grabbed my grandfather's journals, shoving them into my backpack. I had to get them out of here. Maybe someone, somewhere, would believe me. As I was about to leave, I took one last look around the dusty, sun-drenched cabin. My eyes fell on the fireplace. Tucked into a loose stone in the hearth, I saw a small metal box. I'd never noticed it before. My hands shaking, I pried it open. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a single, old-fashioned silver key and a folded, yellowed piece of paper. The paper contained a hand-drawn map of the area around the cabin. A specific spot deep in the woods was circled in red ink. Next to it, my grandfather had written a single word, sanctuary. I stared at the map, then at the key. A part of me, the rational part, screamed at me to get in my car and drive until the woods were just a green smudge in my rearview mirror. But another part, a desperate, foolish part, was intrigued. A sanctuary. A sanctuary from what? From the listeners? Had my grandfather found a way to fight back? Or was this just another symptom of his madness, a final cryptic clue leading to nothing?
My fear was at war with my desperation. Leaving felt like running, like letting it win. The memory of Sarah's voice, the way it had been twisted and used against me, filled me with a cold, hard rage.
This thing had invaded my home, my mind, my memories. It had feasted on my pain. I wasn't just going to run away. I looked at the map again. The location wasn't that far, maybe a 2-hour hike. I could go there, see what it was, and then leave, for good. It was a stupid, reckless idea, but it was the only one I had. I grabbed my new flashlight, a compass, and a large hunting knife I'd found in the kitchen. I put the key in my pocket, the cold metal a small, solid weight against my thigh. I locked my car packed, ready to go. I locked the cabin door behind me, and with my grandfather's map in hand, I walked into the woods. The forest seemed different during the day, less menacing. But now I saw things I hadn't noticed before. Strange, twisted trees that grew in unnatural spirals. Patches of ground where the vegetation was dead and gray, as if blighted by some unseen poison. And the silence, a deep, watchful silence that felt attentive. I followed the map, pushing through thick underbrush and climbing over moss-covered logs. The air grew colder, the sunlight struggling to pierce the dense canopy above. After what felt like an eternity, I found it. A massive, ancient oak tree, larger than any I had ever seen, standing in the center of a small, unnaturally clear glade. Its branches were gnarled and twisted, like the arthritic fingers of some colossal giant. Carved into its trunk were strange spiraling symbols, the same ones I'd seen in my grandfather's journals. At the base of the tree was a low stone structure, almost completely overgrown with moss and ivy. It looked like the entrance to an old root cellar. There was a heavy iron door, rusted and ancient, and in the center of the door was a keyhole. My heart hammered in my chest. This was it, the sanctuary. I took the silver key from my pocket. It slid into the lock with a well-oiled click that seemed impossibly loud in the silent glade. I turned the key, and with a deep groaning sound, the heavy door swung inward, revealing a flight of stone steps leading into darkness. A wave of cold, musty air washed over me, smelling of damp earth and something else, something metallic and sharp, like ozone. I switched on my flashlight, its beam cutting a bright swath through the inky blackness. I took a deep breath, gripped my knife, and descended into the earth. The room at the bottom of the stairs was small and circular. The walls were made of fitted stones. It was a bunker. In the center of the room was a simple wooden table and a chair. On the table was a lantern, a box of matches, and a small reel-to-reel tape recorder. Piled against the walls were supplies, canned food, water jugs, batteries, and several strange-looking devices made of copper coils and what looked like silver wiring. It was my grandfather's workshop, his fortress. I lit the lantern, and the small space filled with a warm, flickering glow. It felt safe. The oppressive silence of the woods was gone, replaced by a deep, comforting quiet. It was as if the stone walls were shielding me from the world outside. I sank into the chair, the exhaustion of the last few days hitting me all at once. My eyes fell on the tape recorder. There was a tape already threaded onto the reels. With a trembling hand, I pressed the play button. My grandfather's voice filled the small room. It was older, more strained than I remembered from my childhood, but it was unmistakably him. "If you are hearing this, Ethan, then I have failed, and I am so sorry. I never wanted you to be a part of this. I tried to protect you, to keep you away from this place, but it seems the woods have a will of their own. They draw in those with hollow spaces inside them, voids left by loss, And your void, my boy, I'm afraid it's as wide as mine." He paused, and I could hear the sound of him taking a shaky breath.
"The things in these woods, the listeners, they are not living in the way we understand it. They are parasites of consciousness. They don't have voices of their own, so they steal ours. They don't have faces, so they try to wear ours. They are drawn to strong emotions, but grief is their delicacy. It's the sweetest song to them. When your grandmother died, my grief was a beacon that lit up this entire forest. I drew them here, or at least I made them louder." I listened, mesmerized as he explained everything. He had spent decades studying them, learning their patterns, their weaknesses. The silver, he explained, seemed to disrupt them, to interfere with their ability to focus. The strange symbols were a kind of ancient warding, a language he had pieced together from obscure folklore and his own terrifying experiences. This bunker, shielded with silver wiring woven into the stone, was the only place they couldn't perceive. It was a blind spot. "They learn," his voice crackled from the speaker. "They are intelligent. They will learn you, Ethan. They will learn your fears, your regrets, your loves. They will use the face of your Sarah against you, just as they used Eleanor's against me. Do not listen. Do not look. They construct a reality around you, a play designed to break you, to make you give in to the sorrow so they can feed. Your only weapon is disbelief." The tape ended with a final chilling warning. "I tried to find a way to drive them out, a way to silence them for good. The device, the resonator, it was my last hope. But I wasn't strong enough. It requires focus, a strength of will that I no longer possess. It's in the chest, if you dare. But I beg you, Ethan, leave. Take what you need and run. This is not your fight." The tape hissed into silence. I sat there for a long time, the lantern light flickering across my face. Run? How could I run? Where could I go? They knew me now. They knew my pain. Would they follow? Or would I just be carrying this terror with me for the rest of my life, jumping at whispers on the wind? Rage, cold and clear, replaced my fear. These things had tormented my grandfather, driven him to this underground existence. They had violated my most private memories, turned my love and loss into a grotesque puppet show. I wouldn't run. Not anymore. I looked around the bunker. This was my grandfather's legacy. Not a dusty cabin, but this knowledge, this fight. I found the device he mentioned in a large, lead-lined chest. It was a complex mess of copper coils, silver plates, and vacuum tubes, all connected to a central crystalline structure. It looked like something out of a 1950s science fiction movie. According to the schematics in his journal, it was designed to emit a specific sonic frequency, a frequency that, in theory, would be agonizing to the listeners, forcing them to retreat. But the journal also contained a stark warning. To activate it, the user had to focus their own mental energy into the crystal, to project a powerful, unwavering emotion. My grandfather had tried to use his grief, but it had only made them stronger, drawing them in like moths to a flame. The device had overloaded, nearly killing him. The right emotion, he had written, was not sorrow or anger. It had to be something pure, something they couldn't corrupt or feed on. Something like acceptance, peace, a state of mind that was the complete antithesis of the turmoil they craved. How was I supposed to achieve that? My mind was a hornet's nest of fear, anger, and heartbreak. I spent the next 2 days in the bunker, poring over my grandfather's journals, studying the resonator's design, and eating cold beans from a can.
I rationed the batteries for my flashlight, spending most of my time in the dim, steady glow of the lantern. The safety of the bunker gave me a strange sense of clarity. I felt detached from the terrified man I had been just a few days ago. The fear was still there, a cold stone in my gut, but it was manageable now. It was a tool, not a master.
I knew I couldn't stay in the bunker forever. The supplies were finite, and they were out there, waiting. I had no doubt about that. I had to face them. I had to try to use the resonator. It was a desperate long shot, but it was better than cowering in a hole in the ground until I starved. The problem was the focus. How could I find peace in the midst of this nightmare? I thought about Sarah. I thought about our breakup, the bitter words, the tears. The pain was still fresh, a raw wound. That was the hollow space they were drawn to. My grandfather was drawn in by his grief for Eleanor. I was being drawn in by my heartbreak for Sarah. To find peace, I had to let her go. Truly let her go. I spent hours meditating, trying to follow the instructions in one of my grandfather's more esoteric books. I focused on my breathing, trying to quiet the storm in my mind. I revisited my memories of Sarah not as sources of pain, but as simple facts, a chapter in my life that was now closed. I acknowledged the love. I acknowledged the pain, and then I let it drift away. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. It felt like tearing a part of myself out, but slowly, painstakingly, I felt a shift inside me. A quiet space began to open up, a sense of calm that I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't happiness. It was just stillness. On the third night, I decided I was ready. I gathered the components of the resonator and carried them, piece by piece, back up to the glade. The sun was setting, painting the sky in fiery shades of orange and purple. The woods were eerily quiet. Too quiet. They knew. I assembled the device in the center of the glade, at the foot of the ancient oak tree. The air was heavy, charged with anticipation. I could feel them gathering just beyond the tree line, unseen but present. A pressure was building in my head, a low hum that vibrated in my teeth. They were curious. They were hungry. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and placed my hands on the crystal at the heart of the machine. I cleared my mind, pushing away the tendrils of fear that tried to snake their way in. I focused on the stillness, the quiet acceptance I had fought so hard to find. I thought of nothing. I felt nothing. I simply was. Then the whisper started. Ethan. It was Sarah's voice again, but this time it was different. It wasn't just in the air around me, it was in my head. Don't do this, Ethan. You don't have to be alone. I saw her face behind my closed eyelids, smiling at me, her eyes filled with love. It was a perfect memory, a perfect illusion. I love you, she whispered. My focus wavered. The pain, the longing, it was still there, buried deep. A tear escaped my eye and rolled down my cheek. The humming in my head grew louder, more insistent. They were feeding on my slip. Then came another voice, my mother's. Ethan, honey, what are you doing? Come home, this place isn't safe. Then my father's, gruff and disappointed. Running away from your problems again, son. I expected better. They were throwing everything at me, pulling phantoms from every corner of my life. My friends, my family, every person I had ever cared about. Their voices swirled around me, a chorus of love, guilt, and regret, all designed to break my concentration, to plunge me back into the emotional chaos they craved. But then, through the cacophony, a new voice emerged. My grandfather's. Not the crackling recording from the bunker, but his real voice,
strong and clear, just as I remembered it from my childhood. They're just echoes, son. Empty rooms. Don't let them furnish them with your heart.
I opened my eyes. The sun had set, and the glade was bathed in a pale, ethereal moonlight. And I could see them. They were stepping out from between the trees, drawn in by the resonator's nascent energy. My grandfather's description hadn't done them justice. They were tall, impossibly thin, their limbs moving with a disjointed, fluid grace. They had no faces, just smooth, pale expanses of what looked like skin or polished bark. They were blank slates. One of them stood directly in front of me, closer than the others. It tilted its head, a curious bird-like gesture. And then its face began to shift. The smooth surface rippled like water. Features began to form, coalescing out of the blankness. It was my face, a perfect mirror image of me, staring back with hollow, empty pits for eyes. It smiled my smile, a grotesque, soulless imitation. This was their final trick, to show me my own emptiness, to make me confront the void within myself. But I wasn't empty anymore. I looked at the thing wearing my face, and I felt nothing but a cold, calm resolve. I poured all my focus, all my will into the crystal. Not the pain of my breakup, not the anger at these creatures, not the fear of dying alone in the woods. I focused on the simple, unshakable truth of my own existence. The feeling of the cool night air on my skin, the steady beat of my own heart, the solid ground beneath my feet. I am here. I am real. You are not. The crystal began to glow, a soft white light that pulsed in time with my heartbeat. A low hum emanated from the device, climbing steadily in pitch. The creatures recoiled, their fluid movements becoming jerky, spasmodic. The one wearing my face let out a silent scream, its features dissolving, melting back into blankness. The hum intensified, becoming a high-pitched, piercing shriek that vibrated through my entire body. It was a sound that felt like it could tear the world apart. The listeners convulsed, their long limbs flailing. They staggered back, retreating into the shadows of the forest. They weren't walking or running. They were dissolving, their forms becoming translucent like smoke before vanishing completely. The shriek from the resonator reached an almost unbearable crescendo, and then, with a loud crack, the crystal shattered. The sound cut off instantly, plunging the glade back into profound silence. The light died. I fell to my knees, gasping for breath, my body trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. I was alone, truly alone. The oppressive, watchful presence that had haunted these woods was gone. The air felt clean, lighter. The silence was no longer menacing. It was just peaceful. I stayed there for a long time, watching the stars appear in the clear, dark sky. I had won. My grandfather had given me the tools, but I had found the strength within myself. The strength to face my own demons, both internal and external. I left the broken resonator at the foot of the old oak tree, a monument to a silent, secret war. I walked back to the cabin, and for the first time, the woods felt welcoming, a place of peace rather than terror. The next morning, I packed the last of my grandfather's journals, took one final look at the cabin on the Devil's Acreage, and drove away. I didn't look back. I don't know if the listeners are gone for good, or if I just drove them deeper into the forest, into silence. I don't know if they exist in other woods, in other lonely, grief-stricken places. I suspect they do. They are a part of the world, a shadow that exists alongside the light.
I'm a different person now. The hollow space inside me isn't gone, but it's no longer a gaping wound. It's a part of me, a scar that reminds me of the battle I fought and won. I carry a new kind of quiet with me, a stillness forged in terror and acceptance. Sometimes, at night, when the wind whispers through the trees outside my new apartment in a city far, far away, I pause and listen. But I'm not afraid anymore. I know the difference between an empty sound and a real one. And I know that the most dangerous monsters aren't the ones that hide in the deep woods. They're the ones we carry inside ourselves. And once you learn to face those, you can face anything.